Welcome to Sisters Inc., our podcast for and about women business owners, brought to you by Black Enterprise. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in America, and on every episode of Sisters Inc., we sit down with one successful CEO and share how she slays the challenges of being a Black woman in business. Today's episode is all about developing profitable partnerships. We're chatting with Brandice Daniel, the founder and CEO of Harlem's Fashion Row, which has been creating bridges between fashion designers of color and mainstream brands for almost 2 decades now. Welcome to Sisters Inc., Brandice, and thanks so much for sitting down with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Elise. I'm so excited to be here. When you said 2 decades, I thought, oh my goodness, it has almost been 2 decades.
I know you're coming up in a couple years on a very impressive anniversary.
Thank you.
And speaking of all that time, nowadays you and Harlem's Fashion Row are practically synonymous with diverse designers. But if you could take us back to 2007, what made you want to start this company?
So I had no idea I was starting a company. I went to a fashion show in Brooklyn. I was living in Harlem at the time. And while I was at that fashion show, I thought, you know what, I want to do this in Harlem. And it was that one thought that led to this eventually becoming a business. And so the first thing that I did was start creating the very first event. And we did the first event. It was really amazing, featuring 4 Black-owned boutiques that were based in Harlem. And the second year, I started to look for designers and really couldn't find them, which took me down a rabbit hole looking down department stores' websites. And realized at the time that less than 1% of designers that were sold on major department stores were designers of color. And it was a problem that I just could not ignore. So I actually initially thought that this was going to be a nonprofit. It wasn't. The only reason that Harlem's Fashion Row is a business today is because of a business coach that I had that told me that Black people have enough nonprofits. And that what we really needed was successful multi-million-dollar businesses.
Why is that like a real fact, though? I mean, I think so many of us set out to solve problems, and we need that reminder. No, we can solve problems and create some wealth for us and our families and generations to come too.
Absolutely. And honestly, the best businesses solve problems. The best businesses are problem solvers. And so I always say to him, because I still keep in touch with him, I say to him, that was the best advice. And I fought him on that for 2 years. But some of the best advice I ever got.
Wow. I love that you're being so open, sharing about that, not only did you get that advice, but that you fought it, and not for a little bit of time, for 2 whole years.
For 2 whole years. Me and him would meet every week. And I go, I just feel like this would be a nonprofit. And he's like, I don't. I mean, and thank goodness that he didn't mind being that strong and disagreeing with me, because I think Harlem's Fashion Row would look a lot different today had I made it a nonprofit from the beginning. So I'm just so grateful that he had the courage to totally disagree with me constantly.
Well, let's talk about what it does look like. Can you walk us through the many different ways that Harlem's Fashion Row is creating opportunities for designers of color?
Yeah, so we do 4 different pillars that we do to help designers. One of them is we have a community called Designers Row, where designers can join and they get access to a lot of just advice and videos from industry leaders on what it takes to become a really great designer. The second thing we do is collaboration. So we partner designers up with large brands and bring a collaboration to the market where people can actually shop it. And that's probably one of the favorite things that we do on my end for designers, because it allows the designer to not have to worry about the production and the financing and all of that, but get compensated for their designs and be able to really just focus on the design process. The third thing that we do is we do New York Fashion Week event where we show the collections of 3 designers of color every single September. It's in front of some of the industry's top leaders. And so it gives them like exposure to stylists and influencers and buyers that can see their collections. And then the last thing that we do is we do something called the HFR Designer Retreat. So every May, we have about 75 designers coming to New York, and we spend 3 days just really spoiling them is what we do. But through those 3 days, we make sure that they get all the information that they need to be successful. And it's really great too, because of the community. And usually Nike has been our lead partner for that for the last 6 years. And then this year we also had PVH come on board as a partner as well.
Your company is known for its collaborations. You have a long and impressive list of partners. You just mentioned Nike. There's also Target, Marriott, Nissan, Coca-Cola, and so many more. I mean, really big hitters. And I'd like us to dive into a couple of them. 2 years ago, you announced a partnership with Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. How did that come about, and what's it meant to Harlem's Fashion Row?
So 2021, I'm go back 1 year further. 2021, I had a dream to do a fashion show on the block that I used to live on, which was 137th Street between 7th and 8th in Harlem. And I wanted the stage for that event to be my old stoop. So I reached out to my landlord. He was in agreement. We had to get the neighbors to also agree to have this show on the street, which meant knocking door to door to get neighbors to say yes. And so we did that event on the street. It was absolutely incredible. We had, kind of the who's who in fashion was there, from Linda Fargo at Bergdorf Goodman. Anna Wintour presented an award there. We just had so many great people. Carlos Nazario was there. Paloma was there. So many great people were there. And after that event, a gentleman walked up to me and he said, next year, he said, hey, I am from LVMH. Next year, we want to own the whole thing. And that was how it happened. So, you never know sometimes. And that event was so hard to bring to life, quite frankly. But you never know. Like, that's why I always tell people, just keep pushing, because you don't know what one thing is going to lead to another. Had we not done that show, or had we quit or given up in 2021, we would not have worked with LVMH the very next year. But that partnership meant so much to us. Through that partnership, we got access to the entire LVMH portfolio, which is, I believe, 70 plus maisons. From that, we end up working with Tiffany & Company. We still have a partnership with them. They're partnered up with North Carolina A&T on what we call the HBCU Summit. We've been able to work with just several of their brands. I was able to go in and actually speak to all their brands and talk to them about the work that we do. I was able to fly to Paris and go to see some of their maisons up close. And so it's just been a really amazing partnership. And we launched the Virgil Abloh Award that year, which was a huge deal for his wife, Shannon Abloh, to say, yes, we can do the Virgil Abloh Award at Harlem's Fashion Row. And it is the only Virgil Abloh Award that exists in the world. And so that partnership definitely meant quite a bit to us. And we're still partners with them.
As you talk about your HBCU summit and the pipeline issues in the fashion industry, you also have a long-standing relationship with Gap Inc., and you teamed up with them on a Closing the Gap initiative that awarded scholarships to fashion departments at select HBCUs and also provided an apprentice program. What are the keys to longevity in partnerships, to having these long relationships?
I'm so happy you asked that, Elisa, because first I'm going to start with this. Our relationship with Gap started through a DM on Instagram. So someone DM'd me on Instagram, maybe 2018, I believe, and said, hey, I'm from Gap, would love to have an exploratory conversation. That is how our partnership started. And from there, of course, we went to the table and said, here's everything we have. And these are the places we think Gap would be a great fit for. But even bigger than that is really the relationships. So every brand partner that we have, our team know that the relationship piece of this is absolutely critical. And so we don't look at brand partnerships as like this transactional thing. We look at it as we're building a relationship with the brand for the long term. even if we don't work with that brand anymore, we still have a great relationship with them. That is our goal. And so Gap is no different. And so because we build relationships with them, it allows me to tell brands, here are my big dreams for Icon 360. My big dream is that HBCU fashion departments can compete with the FITs, the Parsons, and the SCADs of the world. And what that would take is being able to upgrade their the equipment that they use. It would mean being able to give scholarships to the students. It would mean making sure that they have, access to capital to upgrade their curriculum if they need to. And I talked to a Gap executive about this, and she said, we would love to be a part of this. I said, great, let me give you a proposal. And I came back with the Closing the Gap proposal, and they were the first brand to say absolutely. And they donated $500,000 for 2 years in a row. That was absolutely game changing for so many of these HBCUs. And the most amazing thing is we took a tour to some of them, and to see these departments with all of these new equipment, 3D machines, like all of these different like new technology that they would not have had it not been for Gap saying yes, or for me having the courage to tell Gap, here's the big dream. I always think about that, and so our dreams and partnerships, they're so much bigger than us and our businesses. It's really about touching and impacting other people.
Yeah. You said two things there that I really want to underscore. The first was when you were talking about relationships really being the key to these partnerships. Do you have sort of any tips or like a code that you live by when it comes to managing relationships?
So my code is treat people like I want to be treated. That's the code, right? I wrote a book last year about small businesses partnering with big brands. And one of the things that I say is don't approach a brand like a big entity. Approach it as if there's a human on the other side of the Zoom. There's someone who wants to be promoted. There's someone whose kid just got sick. There's someone who's dealing with like real life issues just like you. And so taking the time to really like connect and not always going straight into business or going straight into your pitch, but really taking the time to understand, how are you? Like, how was your day? What's going on? How is business? What's going on in your department? All of those questions really help to create a relationship. And I always try to do one in-person touch point with our brand partners at least once a year. So whether that's me inviting them to my home and we're having, we invite a bartender and have a whole just good moment. Whether it's me going to, I love a fancy breakfast. That's like my thing. Whether me taking them to a fancy breakfast and us just connecting, I will sometimes go to breakfast with a brand partner and never bring up business, like the entire time. And I have learned that that's more important. That like the connection is more important than me talking about business. Sometimes business will come up and we'll talk through it. But I don't make that my number one priority. And our team doesn't either. Our team is really, really great at nurturing relationships over creating transactions.
Well, that was the second thing that I was going to ask you about, because you said every single person on the team knows how important this is. How do you, as the CEO, instill a company culture of collaboration?
We talk about it all the time. All the team has a budget. They have a budget of their own where they can send flowers, breakfast, gifts. Like, you don't have to ask for permission. You don't need approval. Here's the budget. Send it. Like, don't email me or accounting saying, can I send this person flowers for their birthday? Nope. You've got the budget. Do it. And that's been like really helpful. I think too, people have just seen kind of the difference it makes when you have a relationship with a brand versus when it's transactional. I mean, we've been able to say to brands, hey, we're launching this new thing. I mean, our book, Fashion and Color, launched in the windows of Macy's in Herald Square on 34th Street in 6 windows.
The Macy's, not a Macy's, the Macy's.
I mean, where does that happen when you come out with a book that nobody knew what it was going to be, but that again, relationships and saying, hey, we've got this new thing coming out. We would love your support. well, what does that look like? And so having those more kind of approaching partnerships again with the relationships, but even approaching conversations as just conversations versus, you know, I'm here to pitch this thing. You do want to know what you want from a brand, but the relationship creates openings and spaces that go beyond what could be like in your sponsorship deck.
So, when people reach out to you and you're considering these opportunities, what do you look for in a good partner?
I look for someone who really wants to do the work and support designers of color. If there's a brand who we feel like it's just total performance, we do not partner with that brand. We have foregone many partnerships because we just felt like the sincerity wasn't there and it just didn't make sense for us. And so it's really important that the brand that they are aligned with our mission. Even if they've never done anything before, but if they have like the real heart and intention to want to make a change and difference, we're totally open to that.
Okay. Over the years of doing this, what have been some of the common challenges you've experienced working with partners, and how have you sort of navigated through that?
The biggest challenge we had in the beginning was getting partners. Like, it's still not easy to confirm brand partnerships. I tell people it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of follow up. It's not an easy thing. And so, making sure that we manage expectations well is something that I think we've gotten really good at, but we struggled with in the past. Making sure that we have profit and that we're not just doing, if the event costs $50,000, you don't want to just bring in $50,000 for the event. And so even when I teach people now about brand partnerships, I'm like, there's no brand that expects you to do this without a profit. And if there's a brand that wants you to partner with them without any profit, that is not your right brand partner. So, so making sure that profitability is built into your brand partnerships is so, so important. Um, some of the other mistakes, oh my gosh, we made so many mistakes. Not having the right team in place. When you bring on big partners, you need to have an amazing team that can manage those relationships. Um, we've made tons of mistakes. I could be here all day telling you all the things that we've done wrong. But I will say over the past probably 5 years, we got to a place where, you know, we're in a good place. We got a good groove happening. We kind of know how to work with brands. And our goal now is like, how do we exceed their expectations?
Yeah. We're going to come back to the profitable part later because that's important. That's too important for us to jump over. But you said something earlier about not being afraid to make the big ask when you come to the table, and I think so often small businesses get really excited because understandably they want to be associated with established brands, and they sort of get enamored with the idea of the partnership when the reality of the partnership is not that great. So, do you have a process or a checklist for making sure that a partnership is actually going to be beneficial to Harlem's Fashion Row?
The first thing you have to do is a budget for whatever it is you're doing. So you have to make sure you have a budget so that you understand what the ask should be. That is probably number one. We make sure that we always start with here's what it's going to cost us. Here's what we need to bring in to make this a profitable event for us. So that would be number one. You don't want to do an event without profit. You do not want to have an unprofitable partnership. So that would be the first thing. And then, of course, I would say just as important is making sure that we're meeting the brand's needs. So we want to know, what do they want out of this? Like sometimes brands don't always tell you. You have to ask, what does success look like for you? If you don't ask that question, sometimes they'll never know. And then you partner and you do your thing. And then afterwards, they never reach out to you again. And you have no idea why. So you have to understand and maybe be a little bit pushy about like understanding what is success for them so that you can say, okay, this was success for you. Here's how we met and even exceeded that. That is another piece that's really important. We also always make sure that we understand what type of team is this partnership going to require. So is it going to require a social media person? Is it going to require a publicist? Is it going to require somebody who's like not inside our team? Are we gonna have to go externally to find someone to help us execute this? Those are a few things that we think about as soon as a partnership kind of comes to the door.
Yeah. So there are a ton of good reasons to partner that don't involve money, like raising brand awareness or getting access to new customers. And a lot of times small businesses start out with those things when they're partnering. But as you mentioned, it's also possible and preferable to leverage these opportunities to improve the bottom line. So what's been your approach and how has it evolved over the years to make sure that your partnerships are not just successful, but they are profitable as well?
It's okay. And we still will partner with brands with no kind of financial commitment at times, depending on the situation. Very rare, but depending on the situation, we will, but we let the brand know upfront. This is like a one-time deal. The expectation is that if this goes well, that there's a partnership for next year. Like that's the expectation upfront. And so you have to like tell brands, okay, we are excited about an in-kind partnership for this year, but this event does cost us, money. And so we assume we expect that you will see the value in investing in this for next year. Like setting that up from the very beginning is so important. That way, when it goes incredibly well, you come back to the table and they're not surprised when they see a dollar amount attached to this. And we've done a few things now that I think of that we've started and there was no finance. Maybe they provided like the space and the food and they did all the other things. But then the next year there was a fee attached to it.
Yeah. The next year they got to know that they're coming back with a check.
Absolutely. Because they should be able to see the value in what you're offering.
Yeah. You have shared so much wisdom with us today, but before we leave, what would be your best piece of advice for other entrepreneurs who are struggling to figure out how to partner in ways that are right for them?
The first thing I want them to know that it is absolutely possible. When I came into this, I had no clue and no connections. Zero. We still to this day do cold emailing. And so the biggest advice I have for people is to take action. Like you have to email many brands to get a partner. It doesn't happen usually if you email like 3 or 10. When we do our outreach, it's usually to 150 to 200 brands. So it is massive outreach to make sure that we can meet our goal. That's the biggest thing. Take action. And if anyone wants just more information, I do have a book that's available. I also have a course that I have. And so if you don't mind me sharing my email for my website for the book, it's smallbusinessbigpartnershipsbook.com. If you go there, you can purchase the book and I literally lay out everything in that book.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. And even just in that, I took 2 more gems away, which is that you've got to be staffed for it and you've got to be budgeted for it. If partnerships are an important part of your business, you have to build it into the structure of your business. It can't just be something that you do on the side and expect it to have the kind of return that you're hoping for.
Absolutely. Because if you try to do this by yourself without a team, you're going to be so stressed out. You don't want that.
None of us want that. We don't want that for you. Thank you so much, Brandice, for sharing your small business success story. She already shared the website for her book, but please also take a look at the website for her company, which is harlemsfashionrow.com. You can also follow them on Instagram and TikTok at Harlem's Fashion Row or on Facebook and X at HFR Movement. Check out the podcast channel on blackenterprise.com to find more podcasts from Black Enterprise editors, writers, and experts. Be sure to subscribe to Sisters Inc. on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you like what you hear, show us some love by leaving a 5-star review or put a sister on by spreading the word. I'm Elisa Gums for Sisters Inc. with Black Enterprise. Thank you for listening.